Good morning, hello, as you were, relax. Do you guys want to come out and I'll make the introductions. How you all doing?
Today, Maxim,
How do I feel? Fantastic.
I like how we just start with heckling. There's no warm-up.
I don't know,
Just
my shoulders though, I don't know what
bring
it is. We had a nice evening in Pittsburgh. All right, well, thank you very much, everybody, for coming along, and thank you very much to the panelists here. I'm going to run down the line and introduce everybody. This is a fantastic panel with some extraordinary minds, and I think we're going to have a very interesting chat. So I'll start at this end with you, Amy. Thanks to John for the, where's he gone, for the intros. So we have Amy Peck, who is the founder and CEO of EndeavorVR, which is a leading global VR, AR, and now it's usually called XR, strategy and consulting firm. Amy's a recognized thought leader in the space and speaks globally on the future of XR. And again, just for everybody, XR is the catch-all term now for anything to do with VR and AR and alternative reality. We need to include RR in that list, which is real reality. Amy is a venture partner at the Capital Region AR/VR Accelerator, holds several advisory roles, and co-chairs the VR ARA Enterprise Committee. Her own personal mission is to see XR fundamentally improve every aspect of our lives with the goal of making this technology accessible and transformative for everyone. So round of applause, please, for Amy Peck. This is going to be awesome. Next up, we've got James Finlay, who is head of Learn at Adobe, actually responsible for a lot of the educational materials that come from Adobe. Despite a diverse industry field spanning government, consulting, publishing, and now technology, James has always had a focus on education and how learning and empowerment can be used to ensure that regardless of circumstance, everyone has a way to share their experience and define their own way in the world. Recently at Adobe, James has been at the forefront of revamping the onboarding process for Creative Cloud and helped to lead a team that launched an intent-based overhaul for Photoshop learning in less than 60 days. Wow. Okay.
Bringers.
Big round of applause for James Finlay. Okay. This is going to be great. Next, we have Danny Isserles. I hope I got that right. Isserles? Almost. Oh. How would you correct me? Isserles. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Danny Isserles is CEO at Temi USA, Inc. In 1986, Danny's dad bought him his first XT-DOS operated computer, and he became very busy tearing it apart and reassembling it. Man after my own heart. Till Danny discovered it had the game Digger installed, and he laid down the screwdrivers for a bit. Ever since, he's been attached to the latest tech with a strong affiliation to video, photography, and sound as a filmmaker and content creator. A few years ago, Danny was lucky to cross paths with Temi at its very first stages and has been focused on giving birth to the world's first personal robotic assistant that works and has value to its users. So a big hand, please, for Danny Isserles. Wonderful. So I feel with a panel like this, I kind of just need to light the blue touch paper and sit back. We've got some wonderful perspectives. And I was saying before we started that I kind of want to structure this panel, and we want to have some Q&A if people have questions here. I want to structure this panel focused on careers and career development and personal development on 3 stages. So we're going to talk first of all about getting yourself ready for a career, particularly in these industries, very fast-moving, transformative industries. And then I want to talk about how you navigate and manage a career in these industries, and then maybe further down the line, how you transform and maybe look at alternatives. How do you navigate what's next? So I think I kind of want to begin because I know, James, you're working particularly in education, and particularly people at the stage where they're maybe at film schools or learning about print press. Yeah. How, given the fast-moving technology, what are your top tips for people who need to get ready so that when they apply for a job, the person doesn't just sort of frown at them across the desk and actually wants them to work there? What do you do?
Yeah, so I think this in my opinion, this falls into two kind of big categories. One is the skill side, right? So get your hands on the tools, go code if that's your thing, go make films, make different types of films, find whatever you're passionate about and go pursue that from a technology standpoint, and just get experience, right? And the only way to do this, there's no fast hacks, there's no shortcuts. It's just making whatever you want to make, right? There's lead code if you want to code. There's films. You can go make documentaries or short films if you want to do that. If you're want to be an animator, go animate. The second side of it is the people side, right? So in that idea of I'm going to go make these things, you're always going to be interacting with other people who are also interested in this. So getting what your story is, why you care about that, I took apart a computer and fell in love with the game Digger, and so like I've been interested in technology for the rest of the time. That dual purpose is going to allow you to not only say like, listen, I'm passionate about this, I've demonstrated that clearly, I know what the skills are, but then this is who I am, and this is what I'm going to bring to the table, and this is who I want to be, and this is how this is a part of this narrative for me, and that will get you in the door every time.
So that's really a really constructive way of putting it, that you can generate your own experience. But if people can hear you as they generate
Did you all hear
experience,
that?
So these days, things are very different these days because you are in a position to generate experience for yourself. And they say wisdom comes from experience, not age, unfortunately. So, but it's true. But there are some challenges in that. Now, it's easier than it's ever been to just get out there and get access to stuff you can shoot with your phone. Now there's even AR stuff you can do. But Amy, you're working on the really cutting-edge advanced technology for things like VR and AR in particular. How do people get into that from the very start? Maybe when they just don't have the equipment and they want to somehow build their experience.
I'm not sure I have good advice because I just saw VR. I was at Leap Motion, which is this little peripheral that allows you to control your computer using just your hands. And they brought me in as kind of an afterthought because it was, targeted for consumers. And then, one of the investors said, well, maybe there's an enterprise application. And it was right at the same time that the Oculus DK1 came out. And much to the horror of the programmers at Leap Motion, I asked to be placed right in the middle because I needed to learn the technology. So I was like, this brash New Yorker, just moved to San Francisco, dressed in all black, talking really fast with my hands. And, but I would watch them, and that's how I sort of learned the product. But in their infinite wisdom, in a very high-tech way, they duct taped a Leap Motion to the front of this DK1. And I put it on my head, and I could see my hands in a virtual environment. And I was like, this is it. Like, I am done. And so I think it goes to passion.
Right.
Enthusiasm. And it's the same like when we just graduated our second cohort from the accelerator program. And so when we're looking at the investments we're going to make, we look for passion in the founders too, and it's the same thing I think for everyone. I think that really resonates with people, and I think to your point, also having a story, right? Storytelling resonates in any aspect of business, and I think we forget that. And I think true creative people, being able to draw a line between your passion and what you want to do is a surefire way of connecting with a hiring manager or someone who has an opportunity for you.
That's fantastic, and that connects a little bit with what James was saying about that it's about your connections. I know from hiring processes that passion, for me, it's 50% of the interview. And if the person knows about the company and they know about you and they say, yeah, your company did this thing and it was amazing and I think you could have done it better, you're probably going to get hired. But Danny, you tell us a little bit about how you connected with Temi and started your role there, because it sounds like it was a similar journey.
Yeah, I'd say my journey is surprising, not to say weird maybe, but originally my past career is I did almost 11 years as a national theater and film actor in Israel, I don't know how many of you know it, but actors in Israel don't get paid all that well.
Who'd have thought it?
So I seeked another income. And just like James mentioned, I think the key here is interest or love in what you do. Fortunately enough, my dad, as a kid, he would every toy he would bring me, he wouldn't allow me to play with it. He had this abbreviation. I don't think it was very appropriate for a 6-year-old, but he would say RTFM, read the manual. So he wouldn't let me play with anything before I read the manual fully. And I think at this day and age, this is the key. All the information about any profession you want is free and out there. You know, it's in YouTube videos, it's in articles. So basically, once you get interested in something, there's nothing that will stop you to learn it, to become a master of it. And my story with Temi is I opened a film production company, and I started making a product videos or promotional videos for tech companies in Israel. And I came across a defense robotics company. The founder of the company, on the first day of shooting, he saw that I can take apart and fix the robots better than his engineers. And he said, what's going on here? How do you know this? How do you know the robot? I said, well, I came to a shooting day, I read the user manual. So,
Did you use the F word?
Yes, I did.
That is the secret power of technology, actually. If you actually read the manual, you're uber geek.
So I think, today we all have our destinies much more in our hands. They're right in front of us in our computer, or it's all around there. It's just a matter of pulling out the information, and then, as you say, you can come into every interview and know half of the knowledge before even getting hired. So.
I think this is fascinating, and it's so important. And Amy, you touched on the importance of having a passion. And this is a unique era in history where the information is available. You can just go and get it. Things like way back, iTunes U, there's just all these university courses online. There's so much information. But Amy, you said the importance of the passion, but this is a difficult question to articulate. How do you discover a passion? How do you know when you are really passionate and not just a little bit fascinated, not just excited? You show me a new gadget, and for about 5 minutes, I will be super excited. But then I start thinking about the use cases and will I really use it, and what's the functionality? We were talking about the Bose sunglasses, and you feel like, yeah, I totally would use that. So what is that moment? How does a person who's starting out discover what they have a passion for? What is that process for you? You're in the process of working with companies where they're pitching and proposing VR experiences, which for many people they have no experience of, so they don't know that they should care. And how do you make that passion happen?
I don't think there's really a rule for it. I think we are lucky that we do have all of this information available to us at all times, and especially with technology. And I think it's just try everything. I mean, I'm just sending, because I had children at 14, my 2 boys to college. Nobody do math. So yeah, I've got 2 children in college now, and my advice to them is, they both kind of have an idea of what they want to do, but I said, so take all kinds of classes. Take things that are just crazy, off the wall, but if you read the little paragraph and the synopsis, or you hear the professor's really cool, because that actually makes a difference, right? You have a great faculty member or professor that can completely change the scope for you. Take the class, do it, and you're gonna have plenty of time to get degrees and perfect what you want to do. But yeah, just try a little bit of everything. And I think, especially with immersive technology, and I, of course, promote that every chance I get. But if you haven't been in a headset, get in a headset, and not a crappy, sorry Samsung, Gear headset.
Very nicely made.
It's lovely, but I'm saying get in the high-end headset. The lovely one before us was talking about empathy. It is the empathy machine. It is truly a way to walk in someone else's shoes. It is an incredible way to learn. You learn by doing. try and get some AR glasses if you can, if you know someone who's got a HoloLens or a Magic Leap. Try all the technology, just get your hands on it.
And because you can put on a VR headset, but there are certain aspects of the user experience that you just have to try and do. And if you were considering a career with those technologies, maybe you're going to learn Unity or, one of the various different engines to build your 3D models. How do you get people across that hurdle where they go from, wow, that's a mountain of learning, to, okay, I can take these foothills?
It's awesome. I spent literally the past 3 months doing this. So at Adobe, complicated, powerful software, like a lot of other things. So what's happening is the read the manual process, right? Really, really effective, tells you everything that's going on. If you can digest information in that way, that's awesome and really powerful, and all the power to you in the world. The way that we've been pivoting recently is into, we're calling it intent, but ultimately it's learning through use cases, right? So I talked at the very beginning about like learning through doing, right? If you, I'll pull up like a really simple example, right? If you wanted to build the EVO logo, right? So you're gonna need a gradient and you're gonna need a neon effect, right? And there's like a little bit of a shadow on the text. There's lots of different little micro chunks of the software, of the program that you're gonna learn, but putting it together into one package and one use case and one output lets you experience and dip your toe in the water of all those little different things. And so by doing little micro projects, by exploring and getting your hands dirty and finding those little use cases, those intents that you have, you can actually experience the breadth of the software. And what happens is you reach this, not to Malcolm Gladwell this, but you reach this almost tipping point moment where workflows become part of your background because you've done and seen these things a couple different times. And then you start to have an opinion on how you should do them and what are the simple tricks that you want to do. But learning from somebody else is always going to give you how they learned and what their perspective is. It's only by doing those use cases that you start to figure out like what's your flavor in this technology and like what are you bringing to that, and then ultimately getting to that mastery level because you spent the time in it doing the things that are interesting to you.
It's fantastic. So again, this is about reclaiming your power in that situation, right? If you want to be somebody that claims to know Photoshop or who can build a 3D environment in Unity or anything like that, you can do it, but the learning itself takes time and is part of the work that you're just going to have to put the hours in. Interesting though as well, Danny, before we came on stage, you were describing to me the pitch, the selling points for the Temi robot. And I wonder if, and I think this is really interesting for everybody here because A, it's super cool, but B, because, how this is a completely new thing that nobody has a frame of reference for. So the example you were giving there, James, is you want to make the EVO logo. Well, you know that what logos do and you know what you want them to be for. But Danny, could you just give everyone, just very briefly, the two scenarios we spoke about, the corporate and the domestic. I'm a customer who knows nothing about this robot. Why would I want it? Go. Drum roll.
No pressure. To be very brief, at the home, this is a full-on Alexa with a sound system with a screen with full autonomous navigation. So the killer feature that we see would be moving video calls. I can be here right now. I can call my office, my office is later, my home in Manhattan, and I can tap living room, bedroom. The robot will drive there autonomously, so I can spend time with my family, with my dog, with my kids, even when I'm away. It's great for grandparents that live distant from their grandchildren, etc. And obviously, it's an entertainment machine. For the office, again, it has many uses. You can, put it just a voice command for meetings, etc. But again, the coolest thing would be the video. And I know from my experience, I've been in the US for 2 years now. Our founder came for the office warming once, and since then he hasn't entered the United States. He's a very hands-on manager. He's with me through the robot. I'd say average 15 to 17 times a day. He just comes into the office, he goes, comes in, he goes. He knows all our employees, he is with us. And this is the new experience that this device is delivering, that's actually being somewhere rather than just video calling. And that's the...
So, you know, I'm fascinated by this because it is an example, I think, of a technology that people didn't realize they may need or want. And I was fascinated by Bran Ferrin's presentation yesterday, and he was talking about the ways that we just didn't know that we needed this thing, and now we discover we can't live without it. And I think that autonomous robots in a human environment is a massive thing that is going to be really important. But you're at the bleeding edge of that, where you're creating a technology that people... You've got to find out how it works and how it doesn't work and how it moves around. You know, anyone who's a Doctor Who fan, you know, there was this debate for years about what the Daleks would do if there were stairs, and then the Doctor Who TV show makers said, "Oh, they can just fly," obviously, and had an episode where it would fly. I have one this is just curiosity, really. You have arrived at a particular form factor. It has a shape. It has an appearance. Was it much of a process arriving at that, or did you just build something that seemed okay and hope it would be all right?
No, I have a little image of the evolution of design only on this product. Within a year and a half, we went through over 15 different designs, I'd say. It started, we have pictures from the first days. It was, 8 or 9 people sitting around a table with those, those magnetic toys, trying to build some kind of shape of something. We had fragments of ideas. We weren't sure. I must say that throughout the process of 4 years of development, we were extremely stressed because, as you say, we didn't fully understand what it could or should do. To this moment, we're not, it's like, I always give this comparison. When the first iPhone came out, Steve Jobs stood on the stage and he said, I expect that within a few years, we will have over 100 applications. So he didn't even know what he's holding in his hand. And we're now at the same stage. This has an open SDK, and every day we have developers contacting us, and they're like, hey, I want to do this and that. And we sit in the office and we say, hey, we've been working on this for 4 years. How didn't we think of that? But it's discovering a device.
Extra coffee. That's the secret. No, I'm not encouraging you to overdrink coffee. So I want to bring this back around then to this first stage of our panel today, which is you're graduating or you're at the early stages of a new career, and I feel like we've explored that you have to have passion, and that's something that you can perhaps only discover from experiencing things and trying them out, and that you've got to do the work, you've got to train yourself, and you've got to demonstrate that you've done the work. You've got to show. It could be a portfolio, it could be a game that you designed, it could be something that you have done. And James, you mentioned about the connections. I wanted to ask you about that, Amy. Amy's traveling all around the world, presenting and speaking and guiding and influencing and all of that. How does somebody who's looking to connect with and get into this industry, how do they start that process? I mean, are they going to the meetup.com and going to events, or how do you find this thing?
I mean, I think that's part of it. There are lots of these little tech communities in every city, and Meetup and Eventbrite. Some of the larger companies also have footprints in cities around the country and around the world. And it's easy to find like-minded people, or you just go to the CS department at your local university. You'll find plenty of geeks there. And your geek was showing with that Doctor Who reference, by the way.
Card-carrying geek, I can't deny it.
And actually, but I thought something that was really interesting, and we were talking about Adobe. One of the beauty of Adobe products is that you can actually, because I'm not a read the manual person, I'm just like dive in at the deep end of the pool and don't drown person. But I taught myself Photoshop by just using one tool at a time. And so now I am a very good Photoshop hack, which you'll see later in my presentation. But I think that's also sort of the beauty of this. The information's out there, right? So you can find people, and then just find ways to, whatever it happens to be, whether it's learning Unity or learning some of the Adobe suite of tools, just learning how to learn and teaching yourself how to continually be absorbing new skills, I think is probably one of the best starts.
Can I jump in?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I want to stress a point. When you care about something, right? Like when you have a perspective on something, when you have your story, and you brought this up so wonderfully earlier, right? When you have that passion for something, people want to interact with you, right? Like the people who are interested in the exact same thing are dying to meet other people who are interested in the exact same thing, right? Like you're going to become fast friends. You can email these people out of the blue and be like, this is what I love, and like this is what's really cool about what you're doing, and I want to talk more about that. And guess what? They will all respond, right? Like truly and completely. There's no golden gate. You being interested and caring about the same things that they do is always going to open that door, and all it takes is you being able to say, like, this is who I am, this is why this matters to me, and this is why I think we should talk. And 9 times out of 10, they're going to answer.
Oh, and actually, reach out to people. I reach out to people on, because I've had very good luck with that, just reaching out to people on LinkedIn. I have university students reaching out to me all the time. I may not answer the same day or the same week or the same month, but I answer all of them as long as they don't represent an offshore development team they're trying to sell me. So don't sell me anything because I'm not buying. But if you need help or you want resources, reach out to people who you admire and who are in the business you want to be in.
Yeah, totally.
So I certainly think this is a new era of connection and open access to people, and it's people want to connect. I think there was an interview with Noam Chomsky where he was saying that collaboration is more fundamental to human nature than competition, and no major human achievement has ever occurred except through collaboration. People work together. Now, I want to move on a little bit to our navigating and developing your career. Before we do that, does anybody have any questions specifically about getting into a career in this sort of industry? We have a gentleman at the front. Do we have a mic anywhere? You can shout. There we go. We've got a microphone.
I can see just blue lights walking that way.
Go for it.
Thank you. Testing. So I don't want to get too deep into business model and strategy, but this question kind of has something to do with that here. Earlier we were talking about IEEE and getting people involved and engaged in things, and you were talking about what I ingested as micro projects or micro use cases to learn something. And so what I'm wondering is through the pipeline of developing a product or a thing within your industries, is there a means to create opportunities for people to grow and understand your product and the fundamental technology, and use that as a way to get them engaged and then ultimately be full-on consumers of your product? And then how can, say, an outside organization that is focused on education facilitate that process so you can achieve your goals and they can achieve theirs?
So if I understand the question, I think what you're describing is the company, the organization, the people creating the technology, developing learning opportunities, right? They're creating scenarios that people can kick the tires on and try. Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, and actually, I believe a good analogy might be, say Apple's Playgrounds with their new proprietary programming language. I believe they've opened it up, but there's a strategy behind why they developed that. And is that something that can be relevant in other emerging technologies?
Who wants to jump in on that? We're all just nodding and saying, yes, that's a good idea.
I can just say that I think when you are a creator of a product, you are the only one aware of its full capabilities, and you want your users to see all that you've done. if you don't unveil, I'm not American, I'm sorry. If you don't unveil that for them, there are a lot of corners that they will be missed, and the customer will enjoy less. You're less enabling them. So personally, as someone again who used the Adobe tutorials and whatever and all the editing, I did self instructions. I think all these methods, first of all, make the user feel much better with the product, with himself, if it's something that you actually learn, but with the product, obviously. And to Apple's strategy, I'm assuming it's clear. They want to enable developers to make the best stuff only on Apple. So they're making them better at Apple. Yep. And that's every company's should aim in that direction.
But I think it's twofold. I think it's the hallmark of any great product is great, usability, right? Where any user out of the box can go in and start to intuitively interact with that product. And then behind that should be incredible documentation or education or SDKs or whatever it is. So you sort of need both, I think.
Yeah, and I'm overseeing some education stuff with Adobe at the moment, and we're working on things exactly like this, exactly what you're describing. And it's surprisingly challenging because you want to produce materials that serve everyone, but you can't. Everyone has a slightly different way of learning. Ken Robinson gave one of the most popular TED Talks on ever. And he's at the time at least, he was the education secretary for the UK, and he began his talk by saying, we need approximately 7 billion definitions for intelligence. And so I think the best examples of what you're describing are ones where there's a lot of different applications with the resources you're providing. So you can provide, in the case of Adobe, you can provide video files and audio files and, some walkthrough stuff and then a lot of playtime. But I do think that while it's important for companies to produce that sort of content, it is down to the individual. If we're looking at getting into a career in something, you can get your hands on the documentation. You can learn how this stuff works. And I think it's up to the individual to have the passion to drive that workload for themselves. Any more questions on this subject of getting into the industries? At the front here.
Hi. Welcome and thanks for being here. My name is Emilio Salgueiro. I'm in Region 2. And I have a question for all of you. One of the problems that we keep seeing with new innovations and new products coming, if you look at how many times you have to update your apps because you're fixing bugs, it sounds like you spend a lot of time fixing bugs after it's been released, the product is being released, and it's not only software bugs in user software, but also in systems that are life critical, like Boeing and 737s Max, where people didn't just do enough testing before they release the product to the market. So I understand the value of meeting the window of opportunity for the market, but at the same time, how you can balance both.
Well, so I think what you're asking about is, the companies, doing enough Q&A, quality assurance before they release a product, and the follow-up with that. I think that is a very important question that I'm not sure it relates to particularly what we're talking about here about careers and jobs in the industry. But does anybody want to comment on that in terms of, quality assurance is a role, right? That is an occupation. And I think the short answer to your question is you cannot release a product that has no bugs. The process of writing code, it's not mere mortals cannot do that. So you're going to release products that don't work that well. And there is a whole range of careers and jobs to do with tech support. I've worked in tech support, developing the technology, creating that connection with people. And your role may not be developing the technology. Your role may be supporting the technology. Does anybody want to chime in on that?
I think you're gonna have the best example. I'll jump in here real quick. I'm gonna take my Adobe hat off and speak in general terms instead of actually the process of Adobe or the way that we make decisions. So just as someone who's been in tech and things like that, the crucial side of this, right, is technology is moving so quickly, you have to update, right? To Maxim's point, coding is a language, right? Every time you have multiple coders, you now have two different people speaking different dialects of the same language, and sometimes things are gonna break. There's always a balancing act, right? It's how fast is the competition gonna be out with something that's gonna beat us to market, or that might be a better product? How fast can we get something out that tackles one of our competitors' key differential features? The other side of it though, and you go through a QA process, right? But your volume of testing is never gonna be the volume of once you release a product to the market, right? There's no way that even if you had every employee stop what they're doing at a Fortune 500 company and test this product, as soon as you release it to the public, you're gonna eclipse those downloads tenfold, right? And so part of the learning process and part of the QA process is how fast you can iterate after that initial release. Once you have all that data and see where those pipes are that you missed in the first QA are, that's how you can figure out and start to use all of that usage data to fix your pipeline and fix the code. Because that's when you're gonna see all the problems. And you're just not gonna see them all in QA.
I think that's a perfect answer.
Oh, nicely put.
Thank you.
Okay, one quick one down here at the front.
I'm under pressure here. So one thing, just listening to you folks talk about, your business and the things you got is how do you create community? And there's interesting sides to that. One is you're saying your collaborators in Israel effectively can be with you with your machine, right? So they can create a sense of community in your business. You were talking about people getting interested in some of your products, and you create a sense of online community. And then I think one of the biggest applications right now on the VR particularly is for interactive games. So essentially online interactive games. What do you see? And I think just because of the kind of critters we are, the community is so important. And earlier we were talking about community in the IEEE. How do we create that? So what is the future of communities? What are the future ways in which we will interact with each other with our outside environment that are going to change?
That is a great question, and that actually bridges really nicely into the continuation of our panel today. So you're in the industry, you've got a job, yay. Now you've got to stay in it and stay growing, stay vibrantly connected and keep evolving. So to take the conference, see where I slipped that in there, that was so subtle. So, Amy, so what do you, it is the empathy engine, so how do people stay connected in this very fast-moving world?
That's funny. So first of all, now that you have a job, stop asking mom for money. Seriously, Venmo is my enemy. It's interesting because I get this question all the time where, we're kind of projected into the future and we have these digital landscapes and these digital lives and we sort of moving seamlessly in and out of this digital landscape and, when is too much, too much? But the thing is that we are innately, we want to communicate with other people, right? We're social creatures. So we will find new and more interesting ways, but we may interact with people as avatars, like not even ourselves, as avatars, but we'll form communities around that. And it's sort of this balancing act because I think we look at, my kids are at the dining room table and they're just like in their phones like the whole time and looking down, not even communicating with me. But we're going to have AR glasses soon, so Black Mirror can be floating over my head, and they can see their Instagram feed here. So at least they'll be looking directly at me when they ignore me. So this is amazing progress. But no, we will. But we will use. I think we'll find ways that we haven't even thought of to connect using this technology because it is in our DNA. So I don't think the technology puts a barrier. I look at it as an enabler for a different type of communication and community.
I think this is really critical, and again, this is something that Bran touched on yesterday, that our fundamental human needs have not changed in a couple of 100,000 years. We're always going to want to connect and engage and stay participatory. Danny, obviously, you know, this all is a perfect lead up to you to talk about the Temi robot, because this idea of telepresence or virtual presence may be the future of work, as Amy was saying. What would you say about that?
So, Amy, we built this for your family, it seems.
I literally have like a version of this in my talk that I pulled off of. I licensed off of the interwebs.
What we tried originally, or one of the core taglines that we had was the new way to connect. One of the things that we were suffering from, all of us in the company, is neck ache, and 13, 14 hours a day of this, which is, by the way, is a form of communication, but there's levels. When you say, bring tomatoes, that's not a conversation. So I think what fascinated us mostly about creating this is opening a new way to talk to people, to spend time with them again, and the experience with this is very different from sitting in front of your screen and waiting for the call to end. It's walking around your home or office, and we really wanted to tap on that need, which is I think just becoming more and more clear. If 10 years ago we would say, in 20 years we won't be talking to each other. No, we all know by now that we want to talk to each other much more, and I think I'm discovering, by the way, referring to what you said earlier, I'm discovering more and more through virtual connections like LinkedIn, when you're just personal, when you are just a regular human being, people respond to you, even at this day and age. So, I mean, I think we're not losing the human connection. We're just looking for new ways to.
There was a beautiful image of that I saw a couple of years ago where it was saying nobody's communicating anymore because they're on their smartphones. And you see a picture of all these people on a bus. They're all looking at their smartphones. And then it shows something like the 1920s. Everyone's sitting on the bus reading a newspaper. Nobody's having a conversation on the bus. But that feeling of connection is really critical. And I want to talk a bit about, this is a conversation about the future of work. And clearly that concept of virtualized presence or avatars is critical. But I also want to talk a little bit about people navigating this environment, this I think it was Caroline who was here just before us, came up with this phrase a while ago, socio-technical, that we're in a socio-technical environment. Isn't that a great phrase? And we'll credit to Caroline, she's here. So, James, you're working, you've worked with a lot of very large international technology companies. You're working with one right now. When somebody has found their feet in this kind of environment, and we have these new technologies like Temi, we've got VR and virtual presence, which, I was reading that in Japan, people are increasingly feeling more comfortable being virtualized than meeting in person, and that's a very interesting cultural shift. But how does one navigate successfully those connections and that personal development in a large international technology organization? What's your take on that?
Show up at 3:30. No. Yeah, so much to your point of dropping in the room, right, and going and talking to the people who are at the forefront of whatever that is. When you get to an organization of a certain size, what's happening is fundamentally there's some redundancy of work, right? The company values consistency, it values having a set amount of output at a set amount of time. I'm sure many years from now, you're gonna be making sure I have 10,000 units rolling out the door every month, right? Like that is the mark of success. But what that's doing is it's taking away that sort of the specialness and the hope of what sort of human creativity can bring, right? Because you're focusing all your energy on standardizing an output versus sort of something magical can happen. So I think part of it is always going back to that, and I don't want to like put too fine a point on this, but it's always going back to what is your story and what is your passion and how do you connect with other people? Because yes, you are part of a 50,000 or 100,000 person or 10,000 or 1,000 person team, but there are other people who are going to be interested in the same things you are, who are going to like you as a person and want to have coffee with you, and you're going to get to collaborate and leverage each other's superpowers to go make something special and something cool.
That's interesting. So I feel like what you're describing is a kind of community within a community, right? It's like when you go to school on day one, you just discover the kids who also have a Batmobile. And now you're, or the Spider-Man Frisbee. I mean, you're now probably going to be friends for life. But it's about discovering those connections within the larger scale organization. But I wanted to ask you as well, Amy, about, you mentioned early on about having a passion. How do you, and you touched on it there, James, how do you maintain that passion? Or does it evolve into something else?
Actually, yeah, it does. I mean, we started as a company having to, we deal with a lot of legacy systems, right? You can't just bring VR into a corporate environment and just drop it right in. Turns out it's got to, work with the LMS systems and the data analytics, and it's actually a very complicated process to scale. And so we started looking at, leveraging machine learning and AI so we could start to really put some measurements around the efficacy of some of the programs we were doing. And then we thought, well, wouldn't it be great if we could actually record all of this on the blockchain so we could have that life cycle from the first moment an employee steps onto, into a training environment. And we get to watch them evolve in that terrifying Big Brother way we're also afraid of.
It's not paranoia if you know they're out to get you.
We are watching you, I'm sorry. Spoiler alert. No, but it's amazing now. I think it's probably why I don't sleep. It's like I am just sort of obsessed with exponential technology, but not individual technologies now. Now I look at, how this confluence of technologies is going to completely change how we do everything. And to your point, I think finding those people who are passionate about the same things, we get hired. The only people who reach out to us are these little pockets, these little banana republics within large companies who have an idea to do something better. And if you're one of those people, it's really important to find time, find the people to support you and kind of share that dream, because that's when the magic happens. And then big companies get to say, oh, okay, wait a minute, let's just take a deep breath. We have this amazing opportunity to do something new that we hadn't thought of.
So it's interesting that you have these other parallel challenges within these large organizations. But Danny, I wanted to get your take on this as well, because you're working with a company that's relatively early stages. You've launched the product, and now you're in a position where you somehow need to create a culture within your organization. At the same time as busily fighting all the fires and dealing with all the emergencies and, oh my goodness, we ran out of that one widget that we need to make the wheels do the thing. And then, in amongst all of that, there is a particular atmosphere, a particular culture. How do you approach that with a new organization? How do you handle that instead of just it happening?
Wow, that's a tough question. How do we handle that? I think we're a relatively small company, I'd say. We're accumulated 100 people around the world. And I think something very interesting is naturally kind of happened within our company. More to your example of you have a Spider-Man Frisbee, then I'm with you. We throughout the years we found that we became kind of a circle of people who share. We're very, very different people, but we all gather around shared interests, and I think what maintains or builds our company culture is a lot of transparency, a lot of face-to-face, talks and discussions and brainstorming to constantly check each other that we're still speaking the same language, still interested in the same areas, and still see the future together, the same path.
I think you mean face to Temi.
Love what you did there. I agree that this thing of transparency and communication is critical. And in my experience, the companies that, if anything, over-communicate are the ones that are the most successful. Does anybody have any quick questions about this process of navigating a career? You had somebody at the front here, moving your hand around. Oh, look at a man of action coming down the center aisle. Go for it.
So, in terms of navigating your career, and once you're in a job, the tools are rapidly evolving. Say, XR headsets and new tools like these robot assistants are coming in. And when you got into the job, you had a specific set of skills that may or may not have been outdated by the time new technologies come in. So, what are your comments on? Should you adopt to the new technologies, or should the new technologies adopt to you?
Like a Yoda question, isn't it? Right. New technologies adopted, you are. But so, what do you? Yeah, I'm not sure how to present that as a question. I mean, what do you think? How do you? So you're talking about whether your skills are useful or not?
Should you design products to suit the skills that are already there, or do you create products? Do you train people to adopt to the new technologies available?
All right. Yeah. Do you work around the skills in your team, or do you develop the team for the product that you're making? Yeah. What do you guys think?
I'm looking at you. You must have the answer for this.
There's some guardrails there. Yeah. There's not an either or, right? It is absolutely a balancing act. At some point, at some point you will place a bet, right? You're going to place a bet on this is something that's going to be around for a while. This is worth learning. This is an unlock for my team / business / what have you. And then you build the skills around that, right? The evaluation process, and in terms of the technology we are currently using, is it helping us create our goals? Is it flexible enough for us to find those moments of magic versus there might be something else, right? And the cost, and being very eyes open on what the cost is in terms of, right, your opportunity benefit, your opportunity cost. I can go learn this new thing. It might unlock X, Y, Z for me, right? But it means 3 months of downtime, right? So just being aware of how have you built the team element, how have you built the skills within your group to absorb those moments where you need to change course, right? Have you built in the ability for your company and your group to be flexible? And that's going to allow you to make that decision, because honestly, there's going to be some times where you're 3 months off means the company's gone, right? And there's some times where you're like 3 months is nothing compared to the unlock that this new technology is going to bring me. And knowing what that feels like.
So it's kind of a gamble, right? It's a gamble for you as an individual. You're taking a risk, and there's a potential return, and it's a gamble for the organization. Yeah. I'm reminded stupidly of, in the UK, we have this debate. If you have a scone, do you put the jam on before the cream or the cream before the jam? You're going to end up with a scone, some jam, and some cream. So you've just got to keep trying.
Everybody knows it's the cream and the jam.
Yeah, well, no, it's the jam, and then you have to put
milk into the water.
Does the milk go in before the tea, or the tea before the milk?
All,
if you know
American,
the pot.
We know what the British do.
Okay. All right. So one more quick question on navigating within somebody at the back there. Of course. You could put more jam.
We'll about this later.
We'll discuss this later.
We're going to go offline on this. We're not done.
At the back.
Can you speak up a little bit for us?
Is the mic on?
There we go.
No.
I'm totally going to win this argument.
There you go.
There we go, totally on. There we go. Thanks for that. I'm Jim Beck from Region 2, and to kind of piggyback on that question, the thought I have, when you're developing a new product like this, at some point you've got to sit down and figure out the feature set. Now, how much of that is going to come internally from your own vision and passion, and how much is going to come from engaging outside folks, potential users, using that to develop use cases? And can you discuss how you might balance those things and how you go about it?
I want to respond first of all to this, and then I want to hand over to Danny. So my first initial response to that is, I think in life in general, life works best when you plan backwards. You start with the end result, and then you create a roadmap in reverse. You flip the clock, and you start working towards it. But that has to be based on the end user. It's got to be based on the use cases that you have in mind and the demand for that. So that would be my thought on it. But Danny, you're right at the coalface right now.
I'll answer your question, and I'll try to even complement on that question as well. So I can say from our process, originally we wanted to build an elderly robotic assistant. We start building it, and we see, oh, we need to add Wi-Fi connectivity. Okay, and then we say, oh, we need a speaker, and then we say, oh, we need a screen, and suddenly we start seeing a different product from what we envisioned, and we shift and we start building what we build, and then the process becomes much easier, because when you're trying to build or create for yourself, for your needs, you much better, I know what I want much better than what a 70 or 80-year-old would want. So it's much easier to build according to my vision and to my dream. And then, by the way, in a creation process, you know, we don't really think in the beginning of, but how will I do it? We just say, we're going to do this. How? We'll figure it out. And regarding the skill set, whether we choose employees that have a certain skill set, or do we kind of let the employees bring their skill set and use that, it is definitely a combination, but I must say that I think I've discovered in the past 2 years from my employees, I take each and every one, and you know, whether within talks or just during time, I start seeing other capabilities they have that aren't necessarily, you know, on spot for their position or whatever. And I start thinking how I can utilize their personal capabilities into, how do I incorporate that to the day-to-day in the company. And the reason I do that is because immediately they become much more personally involved, because they feel their creativity is brought to life. And they feel they do bring a contribution, a piece of themselves into the company, rather than just sitting in a 50,000 person organization and writing a chunk of specific code, which can feel, you know, less meaningful to an employee.
If you're a boss, do that. If you are an employee, look for that in your boss. Hands down. You'll have a better work life.
Nicely put.
Hands down. That's awesome.
Great advice.
I remember many years ago when I started working for Microsoft doing tech support, I was quite young, and I was stunned that 50% of the interview, it was all Swedish management, very Swedish attitude to business. 50% was, why should we hire you? And then they formally stopped the interview and spent the rest of the interview persuading me that I should want to work for them. Okay, so just quick, and it stayed that way. It was amazing experience working for them. Now, we've got to wind up pretty quickly, but I want to touch on, this is the Evolution of You conference, and I want to touch on the next stages. And you, Amy, used this word exponential. And can you please give us, when you talk about an exponential technology, can you put that in a sentence? What is an exponential technology?
An exponential technology is any technology now that is really going to propel us from where we are today truly into the future. And they're all coming at us so quickly, it's very hard to get our arms around it. But what I see as an incredible value and opportunity for all of us is to start thinking about not necessarily kind of wielding technology and what is the future going to hold, but start building your own future. What do you want to have happen, right? How do you want to live in the future? And then that will inform, you know, much to your point. It's like, my phrase is work backwards from the future, right? Project yourself into the future, and then you have all these tools now to get us there.
Interstellar travel.
There you go.
That's where we're going. Okay, so just a thought from each of you, then we'll do a quick, we'll wind up. So Amy, here you are, you're in an organization, you're working with VR, AR, you're exploring new ways of doing business, and you see an opportunity to dive into an exponential technology, and you feel that this is where you want to be. How do you make that leap? How do you transform from what you have become to what you want to become?
You just ferret away day in and day out. No, it's just, again, it's if you love it, you'll gravitate towards it, and learning the tools of that particular trade or technology, you'll be driven, right? If you really love it, you'll be driven to learn more and more and more. And then the most important thing, scone, clotted cream, jam.
But you just don't get as much cream. Okay, so James.
Yeah, I can't top that. That was awesome. So I think I'll just because you covered the future end, I'll go back a little bit to the basics side of this. So what is the connection principle behind the technology you're using, right? So for something like Temi, right, what does it mean to feel like you're in the room with somebody, right? Like what are the principles and the nuts and bolts and like the Lego building blocks of that experience? And I think if you have a handle on that, that will always ground you in where the technology is going to go, right? Because you understand the fundamental principles of what the interaction looks like and feels like, right? It's a little bit of that, like, the medium is the message component. And if you have that side of things, coupled with the other things you've already mentioned, right? Like your passion and your story and working backwards from where you want to be, that is a very clean handle that's going to allow you to be flexible in whatever the technology wins and how they blow.
Awesome. Great. Danny?
I don't have much to add. I think Amy said it very right. Think where you want to be and go there. I spend every evening on my sofa thinking, am I doing something that I want to do? Does this product deliver something that I want to deliver? And I constantly, we're at a day and age that 2 years, 3 years from now, I'll probably be in a different place. And you constantly are thinking, what is the next mission I want to tackle? And just make sure it keeps your mind running and your smile on your face when you wake up. Yeah.
That is a great way of summing it up. And I feel like we're in a sort of alpha omega thing here, where the beginning of the journey is that you do the research and you do the work and you stay engaged. And the end of the process is that you do the work and you stay engaged. And I remember I used to spend my evenings playing video games, and I was very happy. And now I spend my evenings just doing a bunch of different stuff. And I remember as a teenager, they came up with this concept of the gamification of things. And in particular, there was a lady gave a talk about the gamification of life itself. And instead of putting all of your time and energy into getting the points in the score in the game that you're playing, what if you put that time and energy into your personal development? And what if life itself was the game? And it's a very positive version of existential uncertainty. So 2 quick questions. Do we have time for questions? You're the boss. 1 question. Okay, who has that burning question about the next stages during an illustrious career? Song, right at the front here. Who feels the most burn? Go.
Well, so I really enjoyed this last segment when you all described what I ingested as design thinking or design engineering. You come up with that solution that you want and work the way backwards. I think one of the challenges that we have as engineers is we look at the Lego blocks and then see how we build towards that solution, which I believe is wrong. And I try to tell my guys in the lab that that process can potentially stifle your process to get to that end product. So I'm just curious, real quick, what is the true value of designing that end product first and then reverse engineering it? And is there really a formula that you can go about to make it happen?
Amy, you're probably a great person to answer
Well,
this.
you should just come to my talk at 2:30, which is called Everything You Think You Know About Innovation is Wrong. I'm not kidding. That's what it's called, and we're going to talk about that at 2:30. So please join me.
Yeah, I think it's certainly a truism that we're all winging it, really. You know, and
There's no formula, but I'll share what I know so far.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for attending today. And all that remains is to thank Amy Peck, James Finlay, Danny Isserles. Thank you so much. And I believe it's lunchtime.